Good morning, functional medicine enthusiasts. Today's topic, and I'm going a little bit earlier again today because I've got a 10 o'clock appointment, is going to be chelation, exposure to heavy metals, and why that's important to health. Chelation, first of all, is a process by which you remove heavy metals from the body. And that begs the question, what are heavy metals and why are they important and dangerous to health over time? Heavy metals are toxins, actual metals in the body that in any amount are considered toxic. So that would be lead, mercury, tin, aluminum, nickel, arsenic, things like that, that over time, by the time people reach their fourth, fifth, sixth decade of life, they've got heavy metals in their body. So if that's something that you suspect and you've done some reading around it, for example, that heavy metals can trigger autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, MS, and you go to your doctor and you say, I want to be tested for heavy metal exposure. Pretty much all the traditional physician has in his arsenal is to kind of placate you and say, okay, let's draw your blood. Let's see if you have any evidence of mercury or lead. And 99% of the time, even if people are harboring a heavy metal exposure, their blood work comes back negative. Why is that? Because when you're initially exposed to heavy metals, it's free floating in your bloodstream, but after decades, it goes and hides. Where does it hide? It hides in fat, it hides in blood-rich organs, things like the liver, and it hides in bone. So you have to coax it out. Checking someone's blood is never a good indication of whether or not they have a heavy metal burden, a lifetime burden. There's other practitioners that will look at heavy metal exposure in hair. That isn't very accurate either because hair grows fast, and that's also not a reflection of your lifetime burden. The best way to assess lifetime burden is by using a provocating agent. So in other words, a product, a chelator that coaxes these metals out of the body. The one we typically use in functional medicine is called DMSA. You get it from a compounding pharmacy, and that product acts like a big magnet in the body, and it coaxes these metals out, and then you collect your urine, you start excreting it in urine, and then those levels of heavy metals can be measured. So that's pretty much how it works. Another metal that we routinely find that people are like, what? Is cadmium. If you're working with a patient who is in their 50s or 60s and has stopped smoking for like 20 years, but started smoking when they were like 14, 15, and smoked up until their 40s, they're still harboring a cadmium load in their body. So there's lots of different ways that people can be exposed to heavy metals. Anyone that was born before 1980 has been exposed to lead. Lead used to be in our gasoline, and it was after 1980 that unleaded gasoline came along, and the powers that be in our governmental institutions determined that that was dangerous. But lead was routinely released into the atmosphere. We breathed it in, it circulated in the bloodstream for a time, and then it goes and hides. Where does lead like to hide? Typically in the bones. And why this is important to people is because when after menopause, especially for women, the bones start to thin because estrogen and testosterone are bone building, progesterone is bone maintaining. When you're without those hormones, your bones begin to thin, lead gets released. And lead has a real affinity for the brain. So there's a lot of unexplained dementia out there that could be due to a lead exposure. Osteoporosis sets in, lead gets released, and the brain soaks it up. So that is kind of lead's in the water, lead's in the pipes that bring the water. Some people have workplace exposures by working with industrial paints. Mercury exposure, another favorite of mine. It wasn't unusual for somebody in my age group to play with a broken thermometer as a kid. And also, by the time I reached adulthood, my mouth was loaded up with silver fillings. Those can have the potential to leak systemically into the body over time. And mercury can be a big trigger for autoimmune conditions, most especially. So those are kind of the big drivers of those. Recent exposure to mercury can also be fish, especially tuna. There's only one brand of fresh tuna, I believe it's called Fresh Catch, that is completely mercury free. If you're just eating regular tuna, like from the supermarket, it more than likely has lead in it. Tuna is a big fish. Big fish feed on smaller fish, all the way down to the smallest fish feeding on the plankton. So all the way up the fish food chain, the fish continue to accumulate toxins, most especially mercury. Aluminum exposure, big problem with deodorant, makeup, mascara, aluminum cookware, things like that, people get exposed. Arsenic is in rice. It can get into chickens because industrial raised chickens eat rice that's arsenic laced. So there's lots of different ways that you can be exposed to heavy metals. And if you're not a great detoxer, those metals tend to start to go to hide over time. And they can come out later in life and trigger disease conditions that are up until that point going unexplained. So if we find a lot of mercury in people and they still have a lot of silver fillings in their mouth, before chelating them or trying to draw the toxins out, the heavy metals, it's important to shut the faucet off first and have your fillings replaced. Not all mercury fillings leak. There is an argument to be made for stability in the mouth, but if you got fillings in your teen years, in your early 20s, like I did, they tend to break down over time. They develop hairline fractures, and that mercury has the ability to leak into the body. Let's see, what else can I say about heavy metals? So the fact that I'm here at Glow IV in Pepper Pike, Ohio, we can do IV chelation here. That's pretty much the best way to remove lead from the body. It's a product called EDTA. And if you've been exposed to mercury and you've got a bit of a lead burden, but it's not really bad, oftentimes you can opt for oral chelation, which can last up to 3 months. And then you repeat a heavy metal test, and your hope is always that the levels have started to come down and are within acceptable range. It's possible to push heavy metals out of your body without any help from someone like me. So supporting your detox pathways is always important. So heavy metals are excreted through sweat, through the respiration process, which is breathing in and exhaling, your stool and your urine. Those are the ways that heavy metals and toxins of any kind are removed from the body. So that's kind of today's little thing. And hopefully I will see you next week on Tuesday with Mornings with Mary. Bye.